The Community Security Trust is a body that monitors anti-Semitic incidents and complaints, and it says it's had its highest ever volume of calls since the Paris terrorist attacks earlier this month. Meanwhile, members of Greater Manchester's Jewish community have told BBC Radio Manchester that tensions are high locally and that many people are concerned that copycat attacks could happen here. Now, it's 2 weeks since 17 people were killed in Paris. I suppose the bit of it that we're highlighting at the moment is those 4 hostages and people losing their lives in the kosher supermarket. Well, BBC Radio Manchester's Alice Gregor has been to a bakery in Higher Broughton, and you need to know there's a word in this that will offend some. It won't offend many, but it will offend some.
Thank you.
It takes a long time? No problem.
Brackman's Bakery is in the heart of one of Greater Manchester's biggest Jewish communities. Over the last 2 weeks, security in areas like this has been stepped up, and it's had an impact on business. The owner of this company is Andrew Adelman.
I think a lot of people are concerned about the situation of what's going on, but there is extra security and police in the area, so I think it does put people's minds at rest. The staff and the people that work here feel very safe when they see a lot of security outside, but I also think maybe it has an adverse effect, because when people see all that security outside, it's maybe a bit off-putting. January is always a bit quiet for us anyway, so I think maybe it has put people off coming in last week, straight after the Paris attack.
But it's not just Andrew who's noticed tension and unease. These 2 men who didn't want to be identified say it's at the front of everybody's minds. But that anti-Semitism, on the other hand, has always been an issue for them.
When I was in Cheetham Hill, I visited the bank and I went to a car park, and a Muslim gentleman in traditional dress said to me, "Are you a Jew?" And I thought I'd ignored the comment, and then he shouted, "I piss on you," and I thought that was an anti-Semitic event.
Obviously, you two are sitting here having a coffee, and it is something that would cross your mind and stuff you chat about occasionally, maybe?
Well, everybody chats about it.
Just on a personal level here, how do you feel when you are on the street? Just as simple as that.
Well, you have to keep your wits about you, don't you, nowadays? You've got to keep your wits about you. It's like when the underground bombs went up in London, everybody in London, every time you went down to the underground from that day, as soon as you hit the escalator, you thought about what happened the day before. And they're still doing that. Now here, the Jewish community is a small community, it's a vulnerable community, and it is a target because you know, there's no defence in Cheetham Hill, there's no defence. Everybody's accessible easily, children's school are accessible easily, Brackman's here is accessible easily.
I think everybody is a potential target, and if you're listening to what the Metropolitan Police are saying, the people that actually get the intelligence reports, they're saying there are numerous plots. They've already had plots which they managed to stop in Oldham, where people were going to do harm, and they were doing surveillance in the Jewish community. The intelligence service is saying this is real, this isn't an imagination, and also it's already erupted in Europe. It's not something that's trivial, it's not something that can't happen, and we all know that in this country, within recent memory, we had July the 7th, in which a lot of innocent people were targeted. I don't think it's paranoia, I think it's real, and it's very easy to dismiss it as Jewish paranoia, because we are a community that has a history of persecution, and we tend to overreact, but we're always accused of overreacting, and we're not always wrong.
Well, July the 7th, of course, was a violent, despicable thing, but I think it would be difficult to describe it as anti-Semitic. It was against the whole community rather than just one section of it. The police were mentioned there. Greater Manchester Police, we did approach them, and they say, like other forces nationally, has been reviewing security following recent events. There's no specific threat to Greater Manchester at this time, but it is important, say the cops, that we continue to monitor and assess the situation. Mark Gardner is from the Community Security Trust. As you heard at the outset, they've received more calls since the atrocities in Paris. Mark, is it more people who are worried, or is it more people being verbally and otherwise assaulted?
Good morning, Alan. That's a really good question, and we're trying to work it out. Most of the calls, practically all of the calls, it's because people are just really, really worried about what's going on. The interview there actually captured it quite brilliantly, where the man said, you know what, after the attacks on the London Underground, when people went on the escalators to go down onto the tube, they started to worry about what was going on. So everybody's seen, unfortunately, those terrible events in Paris. They know, as was also referenced in your piece, what happened with Shasta and Mohammed Khan, who were convicted in 2012 of very nearly carrying out a bombing campaign against Jews in North Manchester. Shortly before that, we had the terrible attack on the Jewish school in Toulouse. So I think Jewish people are very much aware of the anti-Semitic component of terrorism today.
We've heard the police say that they're keeping a very specific eye on intelligence and the like, but of course that's fine. You can be reassured by people all over the place. Are Jewish schools and synagogues, which are already fairly secure places, inevitably and regrettably, I mean, are they looking again at their security?
Yes, we're always looking at what more needs to be done. We don't want to turn the community into some kind of fortress that makes people afraid to be Jewish. And, you know, there's a great Jewish community in Manchester. It plays a full part in the city's life, and it's a really good place to be Jewish. So most of the time, this is something that people are aware of, but they're able to put it to the back of their minds. And I think right now that's just a little bit harder.
And, I mean, people feeling afraid is very, very uncomfortable, but whether they need to feel afraid is harder to measure, isn't it? I mean, what is the current threat level?
Well, the police have reassessed the risk in the light of what occurred in Paris. And unfortunately for us, you know, we look at the way that the government and the police raised the national threat level at the end of August to severe, which means that they believe an attack could be, unfortunately, highly likely somewhere in the UK. And then within that already high bracket, they try to work out, okay, well, unfortunately, where might that occur?
I mean, but Mike, that threat level is about attacks against this nation, rather like the 7/7 Underground. It wasn't anti-Semitic. Jews died, but it wasn't anti-Semitic. Do you feel the Jewish community is at greater risk than the rest of us?
I think that when you look at the targets that terrorists choose to hit, unfortunately Jews are quite often, obviously not always and not in the majority of cases, but quite often amongst the targets. I think that Jewish schools unfortunately are at greater risk than any normal schools, for example.
Mark, thank you. And I know what you mean by normal schools. I made the same mistake myself. Non-Jewish schools. Mark Gardner from the Community Security Trust. Thank you very much.